Good evening and welcome. Tonight, we will be continuing our read through of this wonderful book, History of the World, Map by Map. And I'm so excited because if you know this series, I don't look at these maps beforehand. I just kind of glance over to see like a theme, but I don't read any of them. So we're going to explore this together. So it's always so much fun. And also, we have officially moved past the Middle Ages into the beginning of modern times. We are about to discover the new world in history. So we are going to look at some maps about discovery and exploration and trade and all those things. So let's get started. The first one, of course, we start with the Voyages of Columbus, 1492 to 1504. In 1492, Genoese sea captain Christopher Columbus voyaged across the Atlantic in search of a route to China. Columbus hugely underestimated the distance, so when he made landfall on October 12, 1492, in the Bahamas, he believed that he had found the Indies, or East Asia. 3 subsequent voyages explored the Caribbean and part of the South American coastline, but Columbus never accepted that he had found a new continent. So Columbus is this bright pink. So he's sailing here from Spain, 1492. And then, I guess that's the main voyage. And then the dotted line are his other voyages around the Caribbean. Then we have Spanish explorers in North America, 1513 to 1540. Christopher Columbus was soon followed by other Spanish explorers. In 1513, Juan Ponce de Leon landed in Florida, and 4 years later, Francisco Hernández de Córdoba sighted Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula. The pace of exploration quickened after Hernán Cortés's conquest of the Aztec Empire in 1519 to 1521, allowing expeditions deep into the American Southwest in the 1540s. So the solid lime green is Juan Ponce de Leon. He sailed, it just shows him going around Florida. And then the dotted green line is Cordoba, which we see him, I guess they took Columbus's route, right? And then went around, and Cordoba went this way. Then we have the exploration of Brazil, 1500 to 1531. In 1500, Pedro Álvaro Cabral, who was leading a Portuguese expedition to India, sailed too far westward into the Atlantic and made landfall on the coast of Brazil. Some claimed that this apparent accident had been deliberate, but it helped the Portuguese crown to lay claim over a portion of Brazil. Portugal then established a settlement at São Vicente in 1531, and its South American empire expanded to the whole of Brazil. Looks like Cabral is brown, so he went down here, I guess, found the coast of Brazil, when what the hecky, and then sailed up to Goa, which was a Portuguese port in India. The Northwest Passage, 1497 to 1610. The first expedition commissioned by England to search for a Northwest Passage was John Cabot's in 1497, which discovered Newfoundland. Martin Frobisher followed, reaching Baffin Island in 1576, and Henry Hudson's expedition found Hudson Bay in 1610. These voyages marked the beginnings of British colonization in America. So Cabot is the solid red line. He's right there. Hudson is a dotted line. Red dotted line, red dotted line. I see Frobisher going up this way. I guess this is Hudson, yeah. He goes this way and then into Hudson Bay. I see Frobisher is just like, wow, Baffin Island. And Henry Hudson's like, wow, Hudson Bay. I wonder why They didn't call it Frobisher Island. Who's Baffin? Someone will tell me in the comments who that's named after. I actually don't know. The exploration of Canada, 1534 to 1607. In 1534, Jacques Cartier of France explored the Gulf of St. Lawrence, and on a subsequent expedition in 1535 to 1546, it's a long one, he reached the site of present-day Montreal. Samuel de Champlain extended French knowledge of Canada westward from 1600, founding the first French settlement of Point Royal in 1605. By 1607, the French had mapped the whole Atlantic coastline from Cape Cod to Cape Breton. So the green are the French. Cartier is the solid green, so he's going around here checking it out. And de Champlain is the dotted green, so he is going further inland, exploring all over. Next is the Circumnavigation of Africa, which was probably like way before all of this. I don't know why that's box number 6, but okay. By 1488, the Portuguese exploration of Africa's coast had reached the southernmost tip of the continent, when Bartholomew Diaz rounded it and entered the Indian Ocean. In 1497 to 1498, Vasco da Gama went even further, succeeding in opening up a direct trade route to Asia by sailing up Africa's east coast and then across to Calicut in India. Before long, the Portuguese had attained the sources of spices, the most valuable of luxury goods, reaching Malacca in 1509 and the Moluccas in 1512. So da Gama is solid, yellow. So he's sailing down, going all the way around, stopping at the Cape of Good Hope. So stopping in Sofala, stopping off at Malindi, heading over to Calicut, and then later voyages to Malacca. And lastly, we have the Circumnavigation of the Globe, 1519 to 1580. In 1519, Ferdinand Magellan led an expedition looking for the sea route to the Indies. They passed through the Strait of Magellan in October 1520 and reached the Philippines 5 months later. There Magellan was killed in a battle with a local ruler. Under Juan Sebastian Elcano, the expedition returned to Spain in September 1522. A circumnavigation of the globe was not repeated until the Englishman Francis Drake expedition of 1577 to 1580. So Magellan is a solid blue, and we're going to look at the whole map here because he comes down. It stops in Buenos Aires, the Rio de la Plata, stopping here at Puerto San Julian, through the Strait of Magellan, named after him, heading up to the Philippines where he is doomed, and then Elcano takes over going this way, stopping here, and just having a generally bad time all the way back. And then Drake is going to be, let's see, that's Elcano. Okay, but Drake is this one. So Drake is here in England because he's British, along the coast of Africa, coming down through the Strait of Magellan, and he's going up the coastline, stopping in Lima, stopping at Panama City, stopping at Acapulco, great idea. Stopped over in San Francisco Bay, very famously, because that's where I'm from. And then sailing off through the Spice Islands, through the Indian Ocean, swinging back around Africa the way he came. Let's read all these little boxes here. So yes, 1579, Drake sails up the west coast of North America, possibly reaching Vancouver. 1513, there's Ponce de Leon. 1535 to 1546, Cartier sails down the St. Lawrence as far as present-day Montreal. 1522, Elcano reaches Spain with 18 survivors of the circumnavigation. 1488, Bartholomew Diaz rounds the Cape of Good Hope. 1497, da Gama reaches India, but hostility of the local sultan means he does not establish trading relations. And here, like sources of cloves and nutmeg. The Moluccas there. But I'm pretty sure one of the other maps we're going to look at is going to talk more about that in depth. So we will wait till then to learn more about spices. Let's read about what the Spanish did here and just wreaking absolute havoc in the Americas, starting with Cortez and Mexico, 1519 to 1524. The expedition of Hernan Cortez to Mexico in 1519 overwhelmed the rich Aztec Empire within 3 years. The centralized nature of the empire meant that the Spanish acquired all of its resources and tribute-bearing provinces, providing them with a base from which to move southward into the Yucatan Peninsula by 1524. We have the conquest of the Maya, 1527 to 1697. The Maya of the Yucatan Peninsula were politically fragmented, and so the Spanish conquistadors had to reduce each Maya city-state individually. Francisco de Montejo began the process in 1527, but he only made significant progress in the 1540s. The last Maya city, Tayasal, finally fell to the Spanish in 1697. I bet we'll find that on the map later. Then we have, further south, Pizarro, Peru, and Inca resistance, 1527 to 1572. The Inca Empire was already weak from civil war when Francisco Pizarro's small Spanish expedition arrived. He seized the Inca capital at Cusco, effectively taking control of the whole empire. Unlike the Aztecs, the Inca chose a new ruler and resisted until the fall of their last stronghold, Vilcabamba, in 1572. Then we have the Spanish colonial administration, 1537 to 1596. In 1535, a viceroyalty of New Spain was set up, based in Mexico City, to govern the Spanish territories in Central America. A viceroyalty of Peru was established in 1543, based in Lima. Spanish kings issued decrees regarding their governance, and by 1596, some 3,500 of these had accumulated. The blue stars are the new capital cities. We see Mexico City and Lima. You can see, right? Yeah, okay. Then we have the Portuguese in Brazil from 1500 to 1531. Although Pedro Álvares Cabral claimed Brazil for Portugal in 1500, there were no rich empires to conquer and few commodities that were worth trading. Initially, the territory was leased into a consortium of Lisbon merchants, before fear of encroachment by the French in the 1520s led to the establishment of the first permanent settlement at São Vicente in 1531. So Portuguese territory before 1650 is all of the green here. It says the Portuguese routes of expansion are the arrows, so they're heading out. We've got one right there too. Heading out, they're heading out. Portuguese settlements with dates of foundation are the green dots. I see. They're kind of hard to see because they're in the green. But, yeah. Silver from Potosi, 1545 to circa 1600. The new American colonies were a drain on Spain, but it stays mainly in the plain. But the discovery of rich silver deposits at Potosi in Peru in 1545 and at Zacatecas in Mexico in 1546 revolutionized Spanish colonial economics. Fleets crossed the Atlantic regularly back to Spain, carrying 2/5 of the silver mined that was due to the Spanish crown, funding wars and other ventures. So the silver mines, you can see these pickaxes. So we have the big one here in Potosi in what's now Bolivia. And I guess we have some up here in Mexico. Yeah, look at all of the silver up here. Oh my goodness, that's so many. That's a lot. I thought there would be like one or two. That's a lot. Also on this map, anything yellow is Spanish territory before 1650. So you can see just how much they had. They've got all of Florida, most of the Gulf Coast here. These big islands here in the Greater Antilles of the Caribbean: Cuba, Hispaniola, Puerto Rico, Jamaica. Lots of Mexico, well, all of Mexico, some into the Americas here, or America here. They have all the Americas. They've got Mexico, they've got the entirety of Central America, and they've got the entire Pacific coast here, South America, down here to Valdivia, a bunch inland, because that's where all the silver is, and basically just all around the Andes, right, up to along the coast. And then we have forts, or the little forts here, you can see them, tons of them in Florida. I guess it's the best place to defend against everybody up there, right? Interesting. No, forts down here. I know they built forts in the Caribbean, but I guess this is just this time period, right? And then we can see all these towns that they established. The oldest would be Santo Domingo, there in 1496. The oldest in America proper, United States of America, is San Augustine. And yeah, I think that's about all. Oh no, we've got to read all the little things. 1535, the capital of Viceroyalty of New Spain is right there. And then down here it says 1539 to 1572, last capital of Inca Empire after Spanish conquest of Cusco. That's Vilcabamba. 1541, Francisco Pizarro assassinated during civil war with followers of fellow conquistador Diego de Almagro II, there in Lima. And of course, in 1543, the capital of the Viceroyalty of Peru is established. Really interesting map. I feel like I would like to go through and read all the little cities here, but we've got other maps to look at. Way more detail. I can flip this back. Some cool artwork here. Someday, once we finish looking at all the maps, we'll read actually all the sections here. Oh darn, we're still sideways. It's hard to navigate. Colonization of North America. Starting with the Spanish in Florida, 1565 to 1718. Spain was first to establish a European settlement in North America, St. Augustine, Florida, 1565. Its initial colonial efforts had been focused on Mexico and Peru, where there was gold to acquire and empires to conquer. The Spanish were penned into Florida by the growth of English colonies to the north and the arrival of the French in New Orleans to the west in 1718. It's a Spanish migration route, so that looks like way down here, these green arrows coming through. I'm guessing. That makes sense. And then, of course, there's Florida. There's St. Augustine. New France, 1605 to 1718. The French established a settlement at Port Royal in 1605 and then at Quebec within the Canada colony, territory along the St. Lawrence River in 1608. When Quebec fell to the English in 1629 to 1632, Scots founded the colony of Nova Scotia, New Scotland. The French had also claimed land along the Mississippi and named it Louisiana. France's North American colonies were known as New France. The French migration route is this teal color arrow. Teal, let's see, I see one over here, heading over to Guadeloupe. Oh, up here, of course, into Canada. Yeah, and then of course looks like the Spanish are green, the French are all teal, right? Got the big chunk here, the Ventral Louisiana Purchase. Up into Canada here, Quebec, Nova Scotia. But then looks like we have the arrival of the English. 1620. In December 1620, nearly 100 English settlers aboard the Mayflower reached American shores seeking religious freedom and founded a settlement in Plymouth. Many perished during a difficult first winter, but the settlement survived with help from the Mashpee Wampanoag tribe. Over subsequent decades, more migrants arrived from Britain to colonize the eastern seaboard. And so they are white. So we're going this way. We're heading to Jamestown. We're heading to, I guess, York, up to Boston. That's where Plymouth is, right there. And then down to the Bahamas. Trading colonies, 1607 to 1776. British trading colonies began profiting after 1617 once they ventured into tobacco farming. They also found viable commodities in the exploitation of furs and fisheries in the north. The Crown sought to control this trade and passed a series of laws forbidding the American colonies from trading with anyone but England. However, the laws inflamed the hostilities of American colonists and eventually sowed the seeds of revolution. So we've got tobacco growing, we've got fur trading, fisheries, and then the fur traders are these little dots. So you can see them all throughout here in Indian Territory, all throughout Canada. My goodness, so many. And then you can see all the fur trading posts along Hudson Bay, all the tobacco growing here, and fisheries up here in Cape Cod and New England. Number 5 is colonies in the Caribbean, 1624 to 1670. Following in the footsteps of Spain, France and England both began to claim territory in the Caribbean islands. Both nations established settlements on the island of St. Kitts in 1624, and the English acquired Barbados in 1627. By the 1660s, around 40,000 European settlers had arrived in the Caribbean, many as indentured servants. However, by then the slave trade was underway as thousands of Africans were shipped over to work on the new sugar plantations. That's how one of my ancestors came over as indentured servants, but they went to Virginia, not the Caribbean. So the slave trade is the dark blue, so we see heading over to French islands here, zooming over to Mexico, zooming over to, I guess, Honduras there, Jamaica, Hispaniola, Cuba, and then up the coast here. We've got Savannah, Charleston, Jamestown, and New York, Philadelphia area. I can't really tell where it's pointing. That's when my ancestors came over. I traced my ancestry back to a poor house in London, and they had sent, I guess, their son to America, but people just didn't hop on to a boat from a workhouse. He was obviously an indentured servant, right? That's when my very first ancestors arrived in America. But anyway, European Native American conflicts, 1620 to 1676. Rising tensions between the Europeans and local indigenous groups inevitably exploded into fighting, beginning with the First Anglo-Powhatan War around Jamestown in 1620. The most grave one was King Philip's War, fought from 1675 to 1678 between the Wampanoag and the English, which resulted in the burning of many towns and the death of about 3,000 Native Americans. Conflicts, we see these little explosions, and we can see them all over the coast here, and then this one in French territory. I don't see any others in the French area. Let's see what all the little boxes say. I see one up here in Newfoundland. It's 1713, ceded to Britain by the Treaty of Utrecht. 1600 to 1700, French migrants arrive at a rate of 100 per year. 1691, Plymouth absorbed into Massachusetts Bay Colony. 1608, founded by French, occupied by English, Canada Company in 1629 to 1632, attacked again by English in 1690. Looks like it's pointing to Quebec. 1664, Dutch colony of New Amsterdam captured by the English. 1587, first English colony founded by Walter Raleigh, but disappears by 1590. That's Roanoke. 1600 to 1700, about 1,500 slaves are imported per year to British territories. 1600 to 1700, Spanish migrants arrive at a rate of 2,500 migrants per year. Did I read this one? 1600 to 1700 British migrants arrived at a rate of 2,000 per year. That's when my ancestor came to Virginia. I've traced my German roots back. They also went to Virginia, so I get mixed up. But yeah. Let's see what's next. Oh no, I missed a box. In Mexico. It says 1535, the Spanish established the capital of Viceroyalty of New Spain in Mexico City during their conquest of South America, which we already knew. We saw a whole map about it. And then, oh my goodness, look at the Caribbean here. 1665, captured by Britain from Spain, that's Jamaica. And then here in Haiti, 1655, the French colony was established. Saint Domingue it was called then. Now I think we're finished with this map. Great map. We've got more to go though. We're going to talk about the Age of Exchange. I don't know what this map's going to be about. Let's find out. It looks like we're talking about rice, horses, potatoes, tobacco, sugarcane, and diseases. Oh boy. I see exchange. So it's trading, right? A trading map. Let's start with rice. 1500 to 1690. Rice was introduced to Europe between the 8th and 10th centuries, having first been domesticated in Asia approximately 10,000 years ago. It was also separately domesticated in Africa around 3,000 years ago. Rice from both continents was taken to the Americas by European explorers from the early 16th century, and the crop reached South Carolina by 1690. You can see the little rice stalks here. We can see it there in the Americas, in Brazil. What else they grow on rice? I don't see any. Oh, there in the Balkans. I don't see any other rice. Obviously, there's more rice happening around the world, but this was the exchange, right? Being sent to these parts of the world. Horses. 1493 to 1800. First domesticated in Central Asia between 4000 BCE and 2000 BCE, horses later spread to Europe. They were reintroduced to the Americas in the late 15th century, although they did not become widespread until the 17th century. The Plains Indians were among the first people to obtain and use horses. Colonists relied on the animals' mobility in wars against local populations. So horses, of course, going everywhere. We got the Americas. We got South America. I wonder if this just means North America. Like it doesn't mean like New England. North America, South America. And they're already in this part of the world. Potatoes. 1570 to 1774. Indigenous to South America, the potato was first brought to Europe in the late 16th century. The potato was slow to spread across Europe, as many were suspicious of the new plant. But eventually they fried it and they were like, oh my gosh. But eventually it was accepted. It played a key role in decreasing outbreaks of food shortages. King Frederick II of Prussia, for example, ordered large-scale potato cultivation following a famine in 1774. So, of course, we have potatoes in Britain, of course, Ireland, very famously. We got potatoes in Spain, potatoes in Africa, potatoes in Central Asia, potatoes in India, potatoes in Southeast Asia. Like the Philippines, it looks like. All the potatoes. Tobacco, 1528 to 1700. Traditionally used by Native Americans in spiritual ceremonies, tobacco was taken back to Europe by Spanish explorers in 1528. There, the addictive substance became popular, and colonists used this to fund further expansion in North America. From about 1610, British colonists established tobacco plantations along North America's eastern coast. From the early 1700s, most tobacco plantations maximized their profit by utilizing African slaves. So you got tobacco arriving in Europe, Asia, Indian subcontinent, Southeast Asia, being sold there because it's being grown all throughout here. Sugarcane, 1492 to 1650. Sugarcane was brought to the New World from Southeast Asia via Europe. The labor-intensive crop thrived in Brazil and the Caribbean, and by the 1560s, Brazil was the main exporter of sugar to Europe. With local populations reduced by disease, Spanish and Portuguese colonizers transported around 800,000 African slaves to work on sugar plantations by 1650. So we got sugar growing South America, North America, Madagascar, Africa. We got, what's that supposed to be? Where's the corn, obviously. Corn. We got bananas. Lots of things. Cassava. Tomatoes. They brought tomatoes from the New World. What else are we looking at? The sugarcane. Sugarcane in India. Not up here. It ain't growing up there at all. But yeah. And here in Southern Europe, it looks like. Interesting. Then we have disease. New diseases reach America, 1492 to 1600. Old World diseases, including diphtheria, measles, influenza, and smallpox, were carried to the Americas by infected Spanish colonists. Between 1520 and 1600, a series of epidemics in both Mexico and Peru killed 90% of the native population. In Europe, syphilis is thought to have been carried back from the New World by Columbus's crew. Thanks, Columbus. So Old World diseases are red, New World diseases are purple. So we've got Old World here in South America, North America. We've got diseases there, the syphilis in Italy. But we've got Asia, Indian subcontinent, Southeast Asia, spreading that syphilis. And we have all these arrows. Let's see. Location and direction of movement. So let's see. Green, obviously, is Europe. So Europeans moving. Europeans moving. Europeans moving. America is heading out from the Americas to Britain, to Spain, to Italy, and then from here to Europe, and then even this way to the Spice Islands. And then Africa trade is red, so we're going straight up the Mediterranean, and then over to Brazil. And why is it dotted? Do we know why it's dotted? Do we know why this is striped? I'm trying to read the key here. Slave trading regions is striped. Dotted lines is slave trading routes. So these is just for slaves. Heading from West Africa, Madagascar, up into the colonies here in North America, in Cuba, Brazil. Interesting map. Let's read all these boxes. It's 1492. Within 150 years of Columbus landing in the Caribbean, around 80 to 95% of the native population in the Americas perish from new diseases first carried by Columbus's crew. The blue is definitely Spain, right? It's gotta be. Because Panama's gone by then. This must be the... Why don't they have all this? What is blue? The Americas. Oh, you know what it is? It's where things are being brought from Central America, Mexico, and then Spanish South America. The potatoes, 15th and 16th century, explorers bring a number of domesticated animals with them, including horses, cattle, sheep, and pigs. 1660, Chesapeake Bay area, Virginia, exports $35 million worth of tobacco annually across the world. Wow. 1500s, Portuguese traders introduced cassava to Africa from Brazil. Changed their cuisine forever. 1570, traders bring potatoes from South America to Spain, where they became a staple ingredient. Potatoes are also independently brought across to England between 1585 and 1590, changing their diet forever. 1495, the first recorded outbreak of syphilis occurs among French troops besieging Naples. 1550s, Tobacco pipes are made locally as tobacco use becomes widespread throughout Eastern Asia. 1526, Portuguese traders transport slaves from Africa to Brazil to work on plantations. The slave trade quickly becomes a key part of the Colombian exchange. And lastly, it says 1521, Spanish explorers bring foods such as tomatoes and corn from Central America with them when they colonized the Philippines. From here, these New World foods spread throughout Southeast Asia. Can you imagine an Italy before tomatoes? I can't. A Spain before tomatoes? Crazy. We're going to look at one more map. And it's about the spice trade. Since it's all trade themed, we're going to look at this last one. Starting with European colonies in America, 1482 to 1721. Permanent European presence in sub-Saharan Africa began in 1482, with the Portuguese erecting the Elmina Castle, which is later a British possession, in modern Ghana, initially for trading gold. Further outposts were added at Kilwa, Mozambique, and Luanda, Angola. As focus shifted to the slave trade, the British, French, and Dutch began setting up posts along the African coastline. The Dutch took control of the Portuguese slave trading port at Delagoa Bay from 1721 to 1730. The areas of European influence are in purple. We can see it's pretty much this entire coastline here of Africa. Because we've got Portuguese and British here. I'm sure there's like French here. Portuguese are down here and over here. As this is Dutch South Africa, it says. Interesting. The Spice Islands, 1499 to 1796. Many of the spices sought by Europeans were found only in the Moluccas. After the discovery of the maritime route to India in 1499, European traders flocked to the islands, determined to gain access to spices, the most popular of which could yield a 1,000% profit margin in European markets. The Dutch ousted the Portuguese to gain control of the spice trade in the Moluccas in 1602. We can see all these spices. What do we got? Like clove, like maybe cinnamon, I'm not sure. Pepper, right? Things like that. The Portuguese in East Asia, 1511 to 1575. The Portuguese trading empire asserted its dominance in Asia with the seizure of Goa in India in 1510. 2 years later, explorer Francisco Serrao reached Hitu Island in the Moluccas. He formed ties with the local rulers, allowing the Portuguese to erect posts at Ternate and Amboina. Never heard those names. Portugal effectively controlled the Spice Islands until the Dutch arrived in the early 1600s. The Portuguese trade routes are these green dotted lines. So you can see, not teal, right? They're green. Oh no, they're teal. Okay. So, yeah, all through Africa, all along the coast here, all around India, and then it looks like up to Macau. Yeah, all over. The Spanish in the Pacific, 1529 to 1700. The 1529 Treaty of Zaragoza resulted in Spain ceding control of the Spice Islands to Portugal. The Spanish, however, landed in the Philippines in 1569, and by 1571 took control of the Manila region. From 1572, a galleon sailed annually from Manila, carrying silver, which was exchanged with Chinese traders for silk and porcelain. The Spanish are in yellow this time, so we can see them heading this way to land over in their territories in the Philippines. Guess they're not bothered with the whole Indian Ocean because they don't control none of that. They've got enough happening over on the other side of the world anyway. They don't got to worry about the Indian Ocean. French India, 1664 to 1756. In 1664, the French East India Company was established to compete for trade in Southeast Asia. Colonies were established in India, most notably in Chandernagore and Pondicherry. Posts were also erected in the Indian Ocean on the Ile de Bourbon, which is Réunion, 1664, Ile de France, which is Mauritius, 1715, and the Seychelles, 1756. If you're wondering why there's so many French islands in the Indian Ocean, that would be why. So they are blue. They're sailing down. There's Réunion, Mauritius, Seychelles, and they got some spots in mainland India. I didn't know that. It makes sense, though. You'll know all about the British in India, 1600 to 1690. Founded in 1600, the investor-funded British East India Company allowed Britain to open its first trading post in India at Surat in 1613. With the acquisition of Calcutta, Britain ousted its French rival and secured British presence in Bengal. This formed the main bridgehead for its expansion throughout India in the 18th century. The British are pink. They're, of course, coming down the African coast, and they are heading up this way to, looks like Bombay there, and around India up to Calcutta, and even some around Southeast Asia to Macau. Main bases of British East India Company are the pink circles. I see lots of triangles. I don't see no. Oh, there we go. Bombay. There's a circle. Calcutta. And I guess that's it. Last box here is Dutch VOC exert control, 1602 to 1796. Founded in 1602, the Dutch East India Company, or the VOC, there it is in Dutch, I'm not even going to try that, financed trading operations throughout Southeast Asia. The VOC reached the Spice Islands in 1602 and dominated the spice trade for the next 2 centuries, stamping out periodic threats posed by the Portuguese, British, and native Bondanese. The company was nationalized in 1796. So the Dutch are in red. So they're coming. Stopping in Cape Town there. Stopping at Ile de Bourbon, I guess. They're friends there. Heading up toward India. Heading to Malaysia. Heading to Batavia, of course. That's their main center. Main base of VOC. They're in Batavia. And over to the other islands here. Indonesia. The Moluccas, right? There's Ternate, and Amboina. I've never heard those names, but Indonesia geography is one of my little weak spots. I need to work on those. Let's read all the boxes here. 1448. I know like all the islands, but like details about the islands, not a lot. 1448. Dieger, explorer, Diogo. Explorer. That's really something I'd edit out. But oh well. Explorer Diogo Cao claims Angola for the Portuguese. 1664 to 1710. Under Dutch control, the island falls into French hands in 1715 after the Dutch exit, and it's renamed Ile de France. That's what happened. The Dutch were going there first. They weren't friendly with the French. They had it first, and then the French took it over, going home. It's our island now. 1482, Portugal establishes a fort. They're at Elmina, taken over by the Dutch in 1637. 1641 to 1648, the Dutch occupy the island before it returns to the Portuguese. Looks like Fernando Po and Sao Tome. 1515 to 1622, Persian city occupied by Portugal. That's Hormuz. 1510, Portugal gains control of Goa, and they would hold on to that for as long as they could. For a long time. 1613, Britain sets up a trading post. French established a factory in Surat in 1668. 1690, Britain establishes trading post in Bengal capital. 1571, Spain builds outpost. Within a century, Manila becomes home to 150 Spanish households. 1557, the Portuguese set up a trading base there in Macau, and they would hold on to that for as long as possible. Until, 1999, right? Macau was at like 95, the 1990s. 1619, I think 95. No, I think it was December 31st, 1999. I know that was the Panama Canal, too. But moving on, 1619, Dutch destroy the town of Jakarta and build the VOC headquarters under the name Batavia. And that looks like it. Interesting map. There's a lot to look at here. These blobs look like Portuguese areas, right? The Kilwa, Zanzibar, Mombasa, Hormuz. And then all the spices here. Interesting map. I'll show you why we're stopping here. It's because we're moving on to this guy. This baddie right here, Martin Luther and the Reformation. So that's a whole different fish to fry. So we are stopping there. So thank you so much for watching. I hope that you enjoyed this video. I hope you found it relaxing and educational. I know you guys always love these videos. I love them too. They're so fun to make. And I hope that you have a good night. Look at this. We're in the early modern world, 1450 to 1700. We made it. I feel like we're over like a hump in history, right? But anyway.